Hello, everyone. Welcome to Amazing Plantz4mationz. And I have an awesome guest here, as you guys know. Am I frozen or is it just on my end?
You look frozen to me, but you moved there. You just moved.
Okay, there we go. Maybe it was something going on with my internet here, but let me just pop this up and make sure that I don't have too many windows open. That might be what it is here. Oh, now I've just closed everything down. Let's see. Now I can't even see us. All right. Lovely live streaming here. Let's see. What is happening here? There we are. Now we're blank, but can you see me? Okay, as
I
long
can
as
see
you can
you.
see me. Um, this is my good friend here, Angela Crawford. Let me just get started, even if I'm kind of freezing. Hopefully, it's not throwing people off. But I am so excited that you're here. She came on with me, I guess it was 2 years ago now, or about a year and a half, maybe. We were so excited that her book was coming out. So as soon as I knew it was going to be live and out, I was like, you have to come on and talk about it with me because it's such an amazing book. I read it. Dawn's in the middle of listening to it now. She's just gotten Speechify, so she can have books like read to her. So that is so cool. And I'm thinking about like listening into it again. It was so good because it really talks about some of the things that we don't always like think about, but they're just kind of like unspoken things that happen when we go vegan with the spiritual changes. So I actually need to really just pull up your bio and read it. But instead of going that route, since my computer is being so weird here, could you just tell us a little about yourself and your background? I know you're obviously why I am so interested in you is because you have a similar background in psychology. Well, you went way further than I did, but we both love it. So tell us a little bit about yourself if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So yes, I'm Angela Crawford. I'm a psychologist. For 25 years of that, I was a psychotherapist and now an author and speaker and teacher about the interconnection between veganism and thriving emotionally, socially, and spiritually as a vegan. And so this led me, my passion for veganism and how it changed my life led me to do research with other vegans through surveys and interviews, and also just reading the literature to learn how does aligning with our vegan values and eating plant-powered nutrition, how do those things help us emotionally, psychologically, spiritually? And so what I found through those interviews and surveys and tied it together with other research to see, to share that in the book, how does it affect our lives on a more mind, body, spirit level when we truly align with values of compassion for all sentient beings and change our lifestyle?
I love that. And that's one of the things I found so unique about it is that there are a lot of books that we can find that talk about, the transformations that happen as far as like our health changes, sometimes even touches into, the more compassionate or calm that we feel. But like, I haven't seen any deep dives like this into it. And all of the research and all the work that you put into it, I've kind of been lucky enough to see over the time, and even know some of the people that you interviewed for the book. So you really put a lot of work and effort. I recommend this book highly, especially even if you're a new vegan, or if you've been vegan for a long time. For me, it was fun to see how like things that happened to me also were happening to other people that I didn't know, and there's like that connection that we all sort of share. um, and so let's just go back a little bit, just in case people haven't seen our last interview, just to kind of get to know you a little bit. Can you tell us how I know you were a psychotherapist and you were helping people, but how did you get started being vegan, or even learn about any of this?
Yeah. Well, it began with when I became vegetarian late 2006, early 2007, after watching a program that made me aware of workers in meat processing plants and the type of work environment they were in, which made me start to be aware of factory farming and got me thinking about how my food got to me. And as I thought that the conditions for the workers, many of whom were immigrants, seemed very unhealthy and unsafe and unjust, I realized, well, if you don't like what's happening with the workers, what do you think about the animals? And as I started to think about that, I just felt like I wanted to look into plant-based eating. I'd recently eaten at a conference center where they had all plant-based food. And I remembered it was really good. I just thought, though, that I couldn't cook it. I was not a cook, and I wasn't into food prep in general, even aside from cooking. I just ate what was convenient and what was easy and comforting. So microwave meals, and I had a
Mhm.
few go-to cooking meals that I would make, but they were just really repetitive. I always thought I should make better meals, but I just couldn't get myself to do it. But something about watching that program and then having had some yummy plant-based meals, it got me thinking and motivated enough to go buy a cookbook, try out a recipe, have this beautiful adventure of making a gorgeous plant-based lasagna that had all kinds of colors in it of, the red pepper and spinach, and it had artichoke. It was really good. And my family, my husband, then boyfriend, and his family loved it. And then as I tried new recipes and I read up on the nutrition because I wanted to do it right, I wanted to do it in a way that was, healthy for me. And like all of us, I've been kind of indoctrinated to think, oh, you need meat and dairy to be healthy. And so I really needed to read the nutrition to learn, one, that I didn't need meat and dairy to be healthy, but two, just how to go about it in a way that was as balanced as possible. And so as I read more and more, I learned about the health benefits of plant-based nutrition. I learned about people reversing heart disease and other diseases with a plant-based diet. And then I learned more and more about the ethics, the environmental aspects. It just all came together that I knew I needed to, well, first get meat out of my diet. So that was where I started. And I decreased the dairy and eggs, but it took a little while longer, unfortunately longer than I would have liked to fully embrace a vegan lifestyle. I had to, I guess, grow inside into a place where I felt that listening to my values and daring to be different and daring to dive deeper into this, understanding why are people vegans? Why do they go beyond vegetarian to vegan? I had to do a little research to understand that more fully. And once I did in early 2019, it was just like, okay, I watched some documentaries, I did more reading, and just what I learned, it finally sunk in that all aspects of animal agriculture affect one another. They're all part of the same thing. They all have detrimental effects on animals, and also the products from them were not good for my health. I used to have a lot of skin issues and kind of chronic seasonal allergy type symptoms. When I stopped having dairy, those all went away. So just everything kind of came together again, and now I was ready to be vegan. And for me, vegan embraced so many things I cared about. It had an impact on so many things like the planet and our human health crisis that it felt like I had to share it beyond myself. And that led
Mhm.
to writing and research and teaching and just in a lot of different trainings. Just it led me to want to share it beyond just my own personal change.
That is amazing. I love hearing that the different ways that people enter into it. What I find really interesting about your journey into this is, we are all compassionate, but I would imagine with you having a background in helping people kind of overcome emotional issues, being in the background that you were, you had a really deep compassion for people. And I think the fact that looking at the workers in the environment and then relating it over to what's happening in the whole industry and not wanting to support it is very interesting, because a lot of us came into it either for nutritional reasons or through like first of all, knowing about animals and seeing a documentary or something like that. So the fact that you actually found this, that the whole industry was also being abusive to people in certain ways, and for lack of a better term, that the environment wasn't very nice, that you thought, and just how it kind of all came together for you. That's so interesting. And I love that you interviewed different people and probably heard all kinds of different entries into this. And then I think we all, like you said, are confused in the beginning because we think, okay, that dairy's not killing an animal. But the fact that later on down the line, a lot of people make that connection, like, yes, it is still, a problem, because of, it's almost like, to me, it was just even, I don't want to say worse, but when I found out what happens to mother cows and, our female cows, it was just so disturbing. And I won't go into the details here, but if you guys haven't seen or know what's happening, research it. Definitely, if you're one of my friends on Facebook. Mariquita Solis, Vegan Empowerment Coaching and Harmonic Earth Healers. Thank you for joining. And she said she's excited to gift her friend Elizabeth Angela's book tonight. Awesome.
Yay.
That is a great gift. I'm thinking it's a really good gift to give someone who is just also, I think, exploring veganism, so that they can see those transitions that we go through. So then you became vegan, and I found something you said in another interview interesting that I was listening to recently. I think it was on the Vegan Posse interview, where you said that a lot of people think it's restrictive, and I heard you talking about just now when you spoke about the lasagna that you cooked, how like it impressed you that actually the plant-based cooking could be so good and so like colorful, and that you now found this like almost freedom from all that negative thinking of, I couldn't, eat plant-based, probably, that we all had. I could never give up, the meat. I could never cook plant-based. It's a lot easier than we think, and it actually opened up this freedom to align with your values. And that's one of the things that you explored in the book, how we kind of ignore the fact that we might not think that, animal agriculture and everything is right, but we have to ignore it based on this belief that we've been kind of programmed with, that we need meat.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. It's certainly been conditioned and programmed and indoctrinated into us from a very young age that it's, as Dr. Melanie Joy describes it, natural, normal, and necessary is what we're raised to believe. And so we don't question it. It's almost like we don't even realize it's a belief system that certain animals are food or certain animals are not food. It's just so ingrained. It's just sort of like the water we're swimming in. You don't see it. So then something happens for many of us that shifts our perspective and gets us starting to look at it and examine it. Well, is it so natural, especially the way animals are raised in, modern animal agriculture? Is it really natural the way animals are raised? No. When we look deeper, is it really necessary? Well, what about all those plant-based athletes? What about all these plant-based doctors that, many of us don't know about until we research it? But there's amazing people thriving with a plant-based diet once we dare to look at the stories and the research out there. And then is it really normal? Well, it may be normal in the sense that humans have done it for a long time. And right now there are more omnivores than there are vegans. But something being quote unquote socially normal doesn't make it always healthy or right. There are many things we can look back on in human history that were viewed as normal, but we don't view them as right now as we look back, or healthy or good or just. So it just, something shifts us where we start to question it, we look at it, and then not only do we find that we want to question those old narratives and explore a new way of eating and being and living, we also can discover, as you were suggesting, that it's abundant, fulfilling, on so many levels, not only the food level, which can be so satisfying and delicious and flavorful and colorful, but then also it can open us up psychologically and even spiritually as we embark on this lifestyle.
That is amazing. And then I know we'll touch on this a little bit later too, but at what point did you shift your from it being something personal that, hey, I'm feeling better, I'm finding all this information that people are healing, different ailments, and your allergies are getting better, especially after like eliminating dairy, and you decided, when was it that you decided you wanted to help other people and kind of shift, I would assume you shifted your focus in a sense from being a psychotherapist to helping people and educating with veganism? Like, when did that become your greater purpose?
Yeah, when I was vegetarian, it was very transformative in many ways. I felt very good about it. It felt very, like the ethically right thing to do. And yet, when I became vegan, and I was going through a personal growth period anyway during that time. I'd gone through a transformational coaching program that I'd gone through just for my own growth. And I found it so helpful. And I applied a lot of the principles with my therapy clients from what I was learning there, because it just opened my mind to just different concepts, things like listening to my inner voice more,
Mhm.
recognizing the parts of me that fell into people pleasing, even though I hadn't fully realized that, and being able to trust my own knowing, even when it went against what others might have expected of me. So, for many years of my life, I guess I hadn't even fully realized it, but there was a part of me that had learned to go along with family expectations, societal expectations.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean I always did. I was sometimes independent doing my own thing, but when I came to like becoming vegan, I really had to face any part of me that was wanting to just fit in or fly
Yeah.
under the radar, sort of, because you're clearly eating differently and you can't really hide that when you become vegan. So as I was growing through this transformational coaching program, and I worked on myself through that, but also got certified as a transformational coach, it just led me to realize areas of my life where I wasn't being fully authentic. And so I'd been vegetarian for, 12 years, I think, at that point. I just knew that if I were to really honor my values, I needed to become vegan. And so that's when I dove into really learning more and breaking through any blocks that I had that were holding me back. And very quickly upon being vegan, even as I was in the midst of becoming vegan and working through my own blocks and own negative belief systems that were holding me back, I knew that I wanted to help other people with that too. There was just something. I kind of journaled about my own journey, and some of that is shared in the book, because I wanted to, it wasn't easy for me. I know some people become vegan overnight. I admire and appreciate them, but not everybody
Yeah.
does, because the social factors in this can be such an obstacle for so many of us. We are social creatures.
Hmm.
Research shows that our social connections play a huge role in our emotional well-being and physical well-being even. So to overlook the social aspects of it and just think, well, if you just give people information, they'll change. Well, time has shown us that's not necessarily true.
Hmm.
There are psychosocial reasons that sometimes we don't change, even if we think it might be the right thing to do. So I guess as I was evolving through this, I knew that I wanted to help others and bring my background in psychology to help spread this message, which I knew could help people's health, could help our mental health, could help the planet, help animals. So it just very quickly, once I became vegan, then that all, I wasn't sure what it would look like bringing that all together, but I
Right.
just knew somehow it was going to be connected.
I think that's amazing that so many of us do that. Like, just want to shift our whole focus once we find it. Just seems like this is the greater, I don't know if I want to say purpose, but that's not really the word I'm looking for. I guess that's all of a sudden becomes more important than anything else that you're doing or your profession or anything, when you find out, like when you truly like evolve to that consciousness where you make that connection of what is going on, and then everything starts unfolding in layers. You find out, like for you, first of all, the workers maybe, and then it was
Mhm.
what's happening to the animals, and we make the connection that, okay, I've just been told this animal is for food and this one is to love, but really, like that's what happened to me. There was no difference, and
Mhm.
then there's always this belief. I wanted to explore this with you, where I get this a lot on, comments. Well, you eat what you want and I'll eat what I want. And I always try to think of a nice way to explain that. But yes, like if you like lettuce and I like kale, or if you like, apples and I like oranges, that's one thing. But when it comes to like veganism, I think we're considering what the food is that other people are eating, an actual animal. So it's a greater, I guess, ethical problem for us, rather than just, I don't care what you eat. I don't, but I'm trying to make you make that connection, if that makes sense. Do you find that that's hard for a lot of people to, because I
Mhm.
don't judge people, because I was them, like I get it.
Mhm.
Like both of us were, for many years of our life, we were in that same realm of believing what food is. But it's like once you connect it, you want to be that person that explains it, but you also don't want to be that person that like pushes people away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. First of all, when you were saying it's become your purpose, but purpose wasn't quite the right word. I wonder if almost like mission
Yeah.
describes that almost, because I think many of us find it becomes part of our mission, whether we do it professionally or in our spare time or, however we share it, or simply with friends and family or social media. It does become part of our mission to want to spread the message and, for whatever reasons, speak most to our heart, or maybe for all of them, for some of us. And as to how, and yes, that is a challenge. There is a whole chapter in the book that relates to purpose and meaning, and how so many vegans do make it part of their contribution in some way. I mean, we can feel a sense of purpose simply because we're leaving animals off our plate and off of our other purchasing choices. And that in itself is deeply meaningful. But then we often feel compelled to share it beyond that, whether through a business or through volunteer work, or as you mentioned, trying to inspire others. Yeah, and it's really hard because, yeah, it's not the same. You're right. You eat what you eat, I eat what eat, because there are effects of what we eat. And eating a plant-based meal is different than eating an animal-based meal in terms of the consequences. But what's hard is because it's so conditioned into our culture, I think many people feel very disconnected from that. And so I, you know, I tend to relate to people more from sharing my story. And I know you've expressed this before too. You write some beautiful posts, and I've seen you write about this, and plus your beautiful book. But I find that often when we can share it in terms of our own journey of discovery and really relate with people where they are, as you were saying, unless we were born vegan, which not too many people were at this point, but maybe a growing number are. But because most of us weren't born vegan, though, we can relate that we had the same questions, the same thoughts, the same disconnect. And so sometimes just sharing it simply in terms of, well, I once thought that way too, and this is what I've come to feel or discover um,
Mhm.
through my journey. And you sort of leave people to come to their own conclusions rather than trying to quote unquote change someone's mind.
Mhm.
Because, when has any of us changed something because someone told us like we were wrong, or that they
Yeah.
have the answers for us? That's just, I know me personally, I get defensive if someone were to tell me like, this is the religion you need to join, or this is the belief system you need to have.
Yes.
But if they shared their journey with it and how it helped them, or what they discovered, or that we've all kind of been duped with these kinds of messages, and this is what you've discovered and how it's changed your life, it gives me time to process and think about, well, it's a seed planted, and often we need more than one seed planted before we're ready to make a change, and you never know how many seeds have been planted and where your seed will be in that process. Maybe you'll be the one whose voice does get them to take that next step, or maybe not. Maybe they're going to need to do a little research on their own or hear it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love the idea of planting the seed because it is something that like resonated with me, because the first thing that I saw didn't make me know anything about animals, or I didn't have this greater reason for being vegan other than I wanted to lose weight, and I saw people, were losing weight, like it was that
mhm.
simple, and as like simple as it is, that's what I, even mentioned, like you said, thank you for, reading and reviewing my book too, because that was my journey, and that's the way I tell the story of how it unfolded. I saw people eating raw food, decided to try it, but later on down the line is when it actually started making like these new revelations for me. Like I'm in the Facebook group and I saw, like you did, the thing about dairy, and that was actually why I went from, I think, vegan right away, because the first one of the first posts I saw was about what's happening with cows in the dairy industry. So that led me to like, okay, I'll never pick up the cheese or again. And then it was like I started seeing things about, animals, and I started connecting it with one animal. I just thought about this animal being scared and not wanting to participate in it. And I think sometimes we have this broad, like we say animals or people, and when it's like when we think of one isolated person, it or one animal, it really makes a difference in our psyche. And when I started thinking about it like that, that's why I won't touch animals again. There's no craving that makes me, want them in a sense. Plus, if there is, we have so many vegan options. I can have just a vegan, burger. They've really gotten great with the technology of all of that. So it tastes like I remember it tastes if I ever want that. So, like, the thing for me, what did you find was the entry period in your book of all the first of all, tell us, how many people did you actually speak to, or have surveys and interview for your book?
Yeah, about close to 350 filled out the survey. My network was not very big at the time I started this research 4 years ago. I was pretty new vegan myself, but about 350 filled out the survey, and I kept seeing the same themes come up again and again through those surveys. So it led me to believe there was something there, that just as I got more and more people responding, still the same themes were dominating what people were reporting on those surveys. The survey asked about things like, what are some of the most positive emotional and spiritual changes you've had since becoming vegan? And there was a checklist that they could check off, as well as an open-ended question about it where they could write it in their own words. And then there was questions about the challenges they might have had emotionally and socially, and then how had they coped with those. So, and then from the surveys, I went on and I interviewed 75 people in depth about their experience, so that I could have more of a more personal picture of the journey that people had, both how they became vegan as well as how it had benefited them and how they had coped with any, challenges along the way, what had helped them. And so those stories become stories in the book, as well as just overall trends that I share in the book as well.
It's so amazing. It's so well put together and unfolds so nicely. And what did you find was, if you had to say, one of the biggest challenges, we'll start with first before we go to the positives, that you found, that either surprised you or was similar to your own journey?
Yeah. I think, there were both emotional and social challenges. And I will say that those that completed my survey, a lot of them had gotten to a point where they had worked out some of these challenges. So they weren't necessarily in the heights of them at the time they filled out the survey.
Hmm.
But emotionally, so I'll share maybe the emotional and then the social. Emotionally, the challenge was being aware of what happens to animals and carrying that alone with others in their life, not getting it or seeing it or
Mm-hmm.
wanting to know more about it. So there was this emotional burden of knowing this information, witnessing it, experiencing it, feeling the empathy for the animals. And to thrive as a vegan, I think we have to find a way, if we are especially sensitive or empathic, how to hold that information and feel the empathy, but not let it overwhelm us or burn us out. So
Mm-hmm.
that is certainly one piece of information that is important for us as vegans, is how do we include self-care and navigate tough feelings,
Mm-hmm.
because we need to learn to do that so we don't get overwhelmed or anger, just get stuck in anger or sadness, even though we'll have those feelings. But how do we be able to move through them to positive impact? And then there's the social, which the research suggests that the biggest reason that people give when they don't stay vegan over time are the social factors. How do we navigate family gatherings, holidays?
Mm-hmm.
Having a non-vegan partner, for example, can be really challenging. So
Mm-hmm.
these things came up, and maybe what surprised me about the social part is, like, a few people, like I would say maybe half of the people had said that at some point they'd even been ridiculed or verbally attacked for being vegan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's hard. It's hard to have that kind of thing happen.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that, that you have the background in helping people, kind of transform in a way and see things different perspective and help them emotionally deal with things, because you're able to write about this from a perspective of, how we have to care for ourselves in the process of that. So that is so, very true. And I think I have heard you mention this too, that you almost have to decide in yourself that it's okay to be different, because if you're doing something for the greater good and for your own alignment, you have to be strong, in for lack of a better word, like, when you're talking about it and expressing how, it's important to you. And that's hard to do when you're in social settings, because you don't want to, make this big thing about how you're eating, but you obviously, sometimes it's going to come up when your plate looks different than everyone else's.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what you just said about learning to be okay with being different, many of us think of us as ourselves as individualists, and some of us are more than others. But wherever you are on that spectrum of being okay with being different or being an individualist, it's still a journey to stay connected to people you care about who may not yet be vegan, to still have relationships with people you love, and to be willing to be that person that shows up eating the vegan meal and navigating social situations and speaking up in ways that hopefully maybe increase people's interest and curiosity versus shutting down communication. So for example, especially for a new vegan, that could look like, before you're going to a gathering, reaching out to the host and having a conversation and letting them know you're vegan now, because they might not know it yet, and that you'd love to bring something to share. Um, and then, if they ask more about it, sharing more about your reasons why you're vegan, but maybe not overwhelming them with too much information beyond what they're, just
Yeah.
kind of planting seeds, starting to express it, and then bringing great food, because then people see that this is doable, enjoyable, delicious. So yeah, being prepared, definitely not just showing up to something without a plan, because I learned very early on. I went to like a church event soon after I became vegan and thought for sure there'll be something there. Well, it turned out there wasn't much, and so I very quickly learned, like, okay, I have to be proactive. I can't just leave it to chance as I once would have, that, oh, there'll be something I can eat. There may not be, or there may be very little. And so I need to be prepared, bring food with me, have food on hand when I travel, just, be more assertive in communicating about my needs. People surprise you sometimes when you speak up, and especially if you do it in a inviting, respectful way. People sometimes really surprise you. Restaurants that you don't know have anything on the menu might actually be willing to make something especially for you.
That is so true. It is a lot. Like we can set things up in our mind that are going to be very difficult, especially when they're uncomfortable like that. And I don't think like in the beginning, yes it is, but you find like a way with it, that
Mhm.
you'll probably find with a lot of people, or if you're someone who's exploring this, it's a lot of things are, by mistake vegan, and you start to learn what it is you like, especially when you settle into what type of diet. I know if you are like, there's so many different vegan ways to vegan. I always say, like, you can be into, eating a lot of whole food, plant-based. You can be more like a raw vegan like me. So depending on where you are in that particular realm on your journey, you might have to make other arrangements. If you're not eating salt, then it would be the same as any other diet. You would
Mhm.
be, saying, "Hey, can I get one without salt?" Or, like whatever it
Mhm.
is. I think we can't. It's not something that's too complicated, but we do have to realize we're living in a world that is not set up for a vegan. But the things have gotten so much easier because now we're seeing lots of vegan restaurants, vegan options. I know just since I went vegan 6 years ago, the milk section in my own grocery store, there was a little strip on the right hand side of almond and oat milk or whatever. Now it has its own section of all the different brands of almond milk. So there is, that things have gotten a little bit easier. But those are great tips, like you said, being prepared, so you're not caught off guard. And then after you're vegan for a while, I would assume, like you mentioned, the people you interviewed, they had already worked through those things. um, One of the things I wanted to mention to you, especially to get your take on, with your background, is I think one of the things I also learned was, like, when we have connections with people, I didn't realize how often they were tied to food. And it's almost like we have to introduce the connection with someone and really get deeper on a deeper level of what is our connection. And those things, like at a family gathering when we're all laughing and talking, it doesn't always have to be about food, but in the beginning it's very tied to that, like a lot of emotional ties to, gathering around the Thanksgiving table. It tends to be where our focus is until we have to refocus it on those connections.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're naming is so important. I think this whole social, emotional, and historical, cultural, all these aspects can be really overlooked. We think, just again, give someone the information, they'll change. But we have all this, not only the wiring about meat being natural, normal, and necessary that we get wired with from our upbringing, but we also have, like you say, these family traditions and memories and early experiences, and perhaps, grandparents or parents who might relate the food they prepare to love and how they express love to you. And you might have memories of certain events that are associated with comfort and connection. So all of that can be there under the surface that we're not fully aware of it. But I'm thinking for me personally, by the time I became vegetarian and vegan, I wasn't around my immediate family as much because my mother had passed away by then, and I just didn't live near family. But I did experience it a little bit with my in-laws, in that I think my mother-in-law had always been the food provider for the family. And when I first told her I was vegetarian and not eating meat, I remember she didn't respond so well. I think it
Yeah.
felt like an affront to her. And I had to explain to her, this is really a personal decision I'm making that feels really right to me. It's not anything about you or your food. I love your food, but I'm just not eating meat anymore, and just wanted to let you know that. And what I changed over time was, as she aged and wasn't cooking as much, I started bringing the food on the Sunday dinners. I started providing soups and other things that she loved.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we discover ways first, if a loved one ties food to how they express love or receive love, helping to explain that we really care about this person, if there's someone important in our life, but that we're making a lifestyle change that is healthy or right for us for whatever reasons. And we want to have ways to connect with them that are different. And so we start to be, curious how that can happen. maybe we try to change traditions a bit. Certainly now I bring vegan food to any Thanksgiving gathering I'm at.
Yeah.
So we just discover new ways to do old traditions. We find new ways to connect with our loved ones that might not involve food at all, if possible. But if it does, to introduce really delicious foods. And as you mentioned, you can veganize some favorites, perhaps that people in your family love, so they can see that there's a way to do it that's also cruelty free and maybe more healthy and sustainable as well.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I have seen also. In addition to your awesome book, I see that you went from just not knowing how to do this, making lasagna, to now you are like a certified food for life, is it, instructor? Like, so
Yes.
you actually can teach people how to cook in a healthy, sustainable way, which is really cool. Congratulations
Yeah.
on that.
Well, thank you. I found a lot of people in my immediate network where I live, when they're interested in plant-based eating and veganism, it often starts more from the health and nutrition part of it, kind of like your journey did, whether it be weight loss or just wanting to be healthier. So people are curious sometimes for that reason, but they just don't feel like it's doable. And so I wanted to do the Food for Life training through Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, because it gave a way to teach this in a way that's credible, and it's backed by science, and it
Yeah.
teaches very basic recipes. They're not complicated. They're ones that are easy to do, so people can see this is doable, and also they learn a little bit about the health reasons, which then I've found, and I found this in my book research, when people learn, as like your journey, when they learn about veganism for health reasons, that doesn't mean they're not going to open to compassion for animals, because for most of those I interviewed, that's what's happened. Some of them started for health reasons, but then because they weren't eating animals, they were now more willing to learn about the whole animal agriculture thing, and that led them to open up to the compassion piece of it. So, and that sounds like that's what happened in your case as well.
Hmm. Definitely. Yeah. That was, it was 6 months after, I was just going around saying I was, raw vegan just because that's what they called it on the, online or in the documentary. But, when I started into this at 42 years old, I didn't know what I think once or twice I thought about it. And I'm like, what is it, vegan or is it vegetarian? Like, is that the one with no cheese? Like, just like, we all don't know anything. And, it just, it was all a learning experience. But then I think when you figure out first that it's okay, there's good stuff to eat, you can do this. You've been through the sorry, we have a emergency vehicle coming by. When you learn that there is a that it's doable in your life, I think that's what a lot of the complication is. Let's say you were to find something ethical that made you think this doesn't align with your values, immediately that fear comes in that I don't know what to eat, I have to be different. But you eventually, after, at least for me, in 6 months, I had already been through one holiday where I had to bring my veggies. I had, everybody pretty much at that point knew that I ate differently and more like it was like a diet, and they knew that my allergies had disappeared and that I had no back pain. So of course people weren't trying to push me to go back and eating the other way, because I was so passionate that this has changed my life. And of course in the beginning I'm trying to explain to them that I can change their life too, but certainly I found a new way not to be so pushy with it. But uh, it was like at that point I already knew that I could be vegan, and then when I found out about the animals, it was like a new layer unfolded for me. Like, well, this makes even more sense now. Like, why would people not be like, we're hurting animals, and this, agriculture is, I mean, this industry, which I understand there's so many deeper things to it, because some people's families are involved in an industry that has food that serves animals. So it's like I get the deeper thing, that it's not as easy, or it wouldn't be complicated more for some people than it was maybe for me at that time. But I also saw the meaning of it, like, okay, I'm healthier. and I'm not harming animals by my food choices. And I see what it does spiritually for me. It actually made me open up to be a more compassionate person to everything. And it made me see the world differently and see this kind of, it's almost, and I'd be interested to hear some of the similarities that everybody has, but it's almost like the whole world looks different after you discover that. I just don't know how to say it in a way that doesn't sound that would help me to figure out how I unfolded it then. But it almost felt like I was coming out of a matrix I had been living in, with all these things like you need meat, you need dairy, and you have to take medication and all of that. And then it was just like every level of this makes sense environmentally. It makes sense based on compassion for animals, and it made sense now on my health. Of course, I do know that if we just ate potato chips as a vegan, that wouldn't be healthy, but those are vegan, just if anybody's on a potato chip diet. So most of them anyway. But you know what I'm saying? It just, I would be interested to know how that happened for most people. Did it unfold in layers like that as well? Like,
Yeah, I would say for many people, yes. And that whatever the original reason for becoming vegan, the majority it was for ethical reasons, but there were many that it was health, and there were some even environment. And over time, people learned all of those reasons, and they all come together as a compelling reason for living this way. And as you mentioned, the spiritual piece, that was another part of the puzzle for many of the people I interviewed. There is a whole chapter that relates to that, where people described spiritual and related kinds of shifts internally, where sometimes it was things like, I feel more aligned with my ethics. I now realize we're all one, we're all interconnected.
mhm,
I'm now living by my true values of not causing harm to, living by do not harm. And I now really truly honor nonviolence towards all sentient being, ahimsa, compassion.
mhm,
And as you mentioned, seeing things differently, that came through. There's a few stories in there that really illustrated exactly what you're saying. One person put it that it's like, I had LASIK, when I had LASIK surgery, after I had it, I could see everything that I wasn't seeing before. I saw nature in a whole new way.
mhm,
I now realize all beings and myself and nature are all interconnected. And I think when we're eating animals, it's a little harder to make that connection because there's a block, there's a disconnect where we're not wanting to look at certain
mhm,
things. But suddenly, when you're not eating sentient beings, you're freed up to look at how you're connected to them and how all of nature is connected, and you're part of that great, I don't know, that vastness of mystery and everything. So yeah, for many people, there can be a spiritual aspect as you're describing.
that's amazing. What are, if you just had to, like, from your professional opinion, like for people who may be new vegans, or even still having trouble navigating it, if, like you said, their partner's not vegan, or they are, in a situation where they're exploring this, what are some ways also, I feel like you were just talking about, after all those layers unfold, we want to tell everybody everything all at once. And I took a class with you, and Mariquita, and I think Claire Mann's class with, and you did an amazing job there of sharing like some tips with us on how we can communicate this to others in a way that is accepting of their beliefs too.
Yeah. Well, and especially when we're new, I think, we do want to share it, and yet many of us do. But we also need to get first very solid on our own journey. So I think one thing is remembering it's okay, especially for a newer vegan and early in the vegan journey, to give yourself a lot of time to learn from other vegans and to keep reading and connecting with support. First, help your own journey to be as solid as possible so that you feel supported and you have vegan connections. So that would be a first thing, is remember self-care in the whole process. And then as you're wanting to share it with others, I feel like, one, there's different aspects of of this. So, what is our intention for a particular conversation? What are we trying to accomplish? I think that's good to think about because there are times that we're wanting our partner or whoever just simply to support us because maybe they don't get it and they're sort of undermining us. So sometimes we're just simply wanting to make sure that we have support on hand for us on our journey. And at other times it's our intention to inspire or help others awaken to the possibilities of this lifestyle.
Mhm.
And we don't want to blend those two. Sometimes we do that, like what we're really needing is our partner to support us. And yes, we'd love them to become vegan too, but sometimes we got to separate those conversations. So I'd be thinking about what is your intention for a particular communication or conversation and holding that in mind as you're approaching it so that you can ask for what you truly need. Sometimes it's helpful. Dr. Melanie Joy talks about vegan allies. Sometimes it's helpful to first just ask someone to be an ally to us on our journey,
Mhm.
because then they can learn about it from you and why it matters to you and how they can support you without immediately you saying they need to change.
Yeah.
And then they'll learn and they might be more open. Over time, if people are curious to learn more or to try more plant-based, and then we can invite them in. We can see what information is most relevant or helpful for them,
Mhm.
answer questions, share our journeys. So I think it's like meeting people where they're at and
Mhm.
not just lecturing to them, but seeing what they're truly interested in and being willing to share from that perspective. So those are some thoughts. I don't always do this perfectly myself. There's times that I might be annoyed by something, or I don't know, someone is eating something and it just happens to trigger me in that moment. It's
Mhm.
easier, I don't know, at times to not always live by these good communication principles. But I think if once we recognize something's not going well, to step back, take a deep breath.
Mhm.
What is my intention here? What do I want for myself, for the other person, and for this communication? And how do I do it in a way then that's going to be most effective versus just venting my feelings, which might make me feel better temporarily, but may not actually lead to change.
That's true. I love that what you said. Like, what is your bigger picture of this conversation? If you're just here to have an argument, then that's one thing. But if you really want to initiate what we think and feel is the greater good for the animals, then we would want them to be, to come in. I think sometimes we get so caught up, especially when we are first looking into all of this information, it hurts us to see what's happening to animals. We forget to have human compassion when we're talking about it a lot of times. I love that you always bring us back to exploring that in all of the things that I've seen you write about. Um, and it's interesting going all the way full circle that that's how you initially came into this, was the human aspect of what was happening to people in this industry. So um, what I just wanted to, I know we have maybe, is it okay if we go like a few more minutes? Okay, I know
Sure.
you probably have another event because you're so busy. What
Mhm.
what led you, just so that we know, like what inspired you to start writing the book initially? Did you have like one moment, or was it like a combination of you just were discovering all this based on people you were talking to?
I had had a vision of writing a book for quite some time, but before I became vegan, I wasn't sure exactly what it would be. I knew I'd always enjoyed interviewing people and hearing their stories, and I'd read other books where that was the format. So I had a sense that I would be writing something. When I became vegan, I knew it would be about veganism. I just knew and that it would bring together psychology and veganism. So I had that inkling. And then as I became vegan and I saw my own inner changes psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and met other vegans who reported similar things, I felt that that was a missing piece in the books that I was reading. While there wasn't as much about, as you mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot about the health aspects, but I didn't see as much about how are we changed internally and psychologically and emotionally when we align with our values and eat this way and let go of animal products and invite this whole new way of vegan living. What happens to us on that more mind, body, spirit level? So I wanted to explore that with people and So I started the surveys and interviews, and from that took those core themes that I discovered from that to create the book. And it's been a process. That's what I will definitely say.
Like literally, you have been working on this book. I know personally because we talked last time when we were talking about you were in the middle of it and you were still in the middle of research. So like, definitely go out and like get this book because like it is so worth it. What what did you find was the like that people are happier, I guess. Let's like, what was the overall theme that you found? Like it even though we have all these struggles, like no one wants to go the other way. It's so worth it, right? Like, did you find that for other people too?
Yeah, I think, some of us have heard this who are vegan, but that idea that, my biggest regret is not that I'm vegan, but that I didn't do it sooner. I certainly heard that. And I think maybe the words that capture it best, there's a chapter called Create Authentic Fulfillment. I think authentic fulfillment might describe it best. It kind of encompasses all of the other pieces, which are things like values, alignment, compassion, purpose, connection, empowerment. Authentic fulfillment is basically this idea that we feel deeply fulfilled because we're living aligned with our deepest values and living in a way that honors those values and is kind to ourselves, other beings, and the planet. And authentic fulfillment, as you'll see as you read the book, it doesn't mean being happy all the time. Research has actually shown that living a life of meaning and purpose, while it's correlated with being happy, we'll have our happy moments. There can also be there's one quote in there about a cosmic sadness because the world doesn't yet measure up to what we can envision it to ideally be, this world of compassion and sustainability and flourishing for all beings. So I think it's a healthy balance that we hold where we're fulfilled because we're living true to what matters to us the best we can. And we'll have some tough feelings at times as we face some of the challenges. And yet there can be a deeper contentment and peace that helps us to navigate any challenges. And that's, I think, a theme that came through with a lot of the people that I spoke to and that filled out the survey.
That's so true. It's like a core principle that makes everything else easier to align your choices with when it's not something you have to go back and forth about. It's like, this is what I am, this is who I am, this is what I've grown to, and this is my standard that I will not touch these particular foods. And it makes that part easy when you think about all the other things going on or all the creatures that you're trying to help in life. This is a picture of the beautiful cover of the book. Is so pretty. I love the colors. I know Dawn, I showed her because she's like, her favorite color is purple. So I'm like,
yeah, I was blessed
just
that
put her on the cover, like without even getting the vegan transformation. It's called The Vegan Transformation, A Journey to Heal Yourself and the World. I love the subtitle, especially after I read it, because how that aligns with how we all move through this. Like, first we're healing ourselves, both alignment wise and maybe even health wise for many of us, and then it shifts outwardly that we want to help the world.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we hear the word transformation, it's used more and more lately. It's become a very widely used word, and so we think sometimes of like the physical transformation, and certainly that happens, and there's a chapter that shares some of that. But what I was getting at more than that, and the subtitle helps to capture that, is that there's an inner journey. It doesn't mean there's, it basically means that we're on an inner growth journey that is becoming maybe more fully and truly who we really are at our core, by embracing our values, embracing our compassion. And I love how Marakita says the book is so beautiful. I want to shout out to my publisher, Lantern Publishing,
Oh yes,
who has
thank you.
published a lot of wonderful books on different things from animal rights to social justice to the environment. They contracted with someone to create the cover, and I totally love it. And I hear a lot of great things about it. And you mentioned about listening to an audio version of it. My publisher is working on creating an audio version too, just for people that prefer that format. That will be coming out in time too. So
Oh, that's amazing. And also, can you tell us where else we can buy the book?
definitely. So you can go to my website, angelacrawfordphd.com, and under the book tab, it lists several different bookstores. It's, certainly at Amazon and paperback or Kindle, at Barnes and Noble, Bookshop, and I have about 3 others listed there too. So just to know that there's a variety of places that you can buy it, and I totally appreciate it. And I want to say I think it's, I'm a vegan and I love learning. So I read books like this because I'm always like you, growing and learning, JJ. So I, as a vegan, love to read and learn more about all the reasons that veganism is so powerful. But I do also think it's written, at least it was intended to be written in an inviting way for someone that's just curious about the lifestyle too. So it can be also good for if you have someone in your life that might be curious to learn more about it and the benefits of it without it feeling threatening or judgmental. And I have a good friend right now, um, who is not, their spouse bought the book and they weren't really interested, but they're reading it and they're saying, this is getting me to think about this more. Hi, I might consider this. So I just
Yeah,
want to say that made me feel good to know that someone that really wasn't too open to it initially is reading it, and it's getting them to consider things they weren't before. So
I love that. And sometimes, maybe like people that know me, I'm probably the only vegan they know and the only vegan they've ever heard from. And so for people who are exploring it's interesting so that you have culminated, all of these stories and kind of these common themes that they can see from many other people. And then also, like for me being vegan, it was so interesting now to know that other people had the same spiritual transformation. I think that's what also stands out for me is like, oh, okay, so yeah, it happened that way for me. It's interesting. It's so I'm sure just you were feeling that as you were interviewing people, like the common themes that we all really as humans have. But then
mhm,
there's that subset of like when we're vegan, those same human values just get even like expand more, or just get
mhm,
like just become so clear. And like the happiness, even like I would suggest too that there sometimes is a negative connotation to vegans, or they can be judgmental sometimes. We've all heard that, and people comment to me, oh, I'm glad you're not like that kind of vegan, whatever that means. But like we get to a place where it's so emotional that I don't think we all know how to communicate it. And I love that's what you teach and always instill in people. And even when I've had conversation with you, how you communicate with others, like you said, we're all not perfect, but the way we communicate it is so important. And I love that you brought to light the spiritual reasons that people are vegan, so you can see where that passion comes from.
yeah, definitely. And and each of us can bring our own personality and our own gifts to share this message. Other people will do it differently than I do and differently than you do, but we each have our own gift and our own way that we can bring. And so just to feel good about your own unique style, and then we can also keep growing, as you're suggesting, to learn to refine the way we express our style and our message even a little bit more, to be more effective, to be more impactful.
I know it's I definitely will share again today on the my page. If you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, I'm going to share the review that I wrote for it because it was a lot more in depth, and I won't read the whole thing here because we're already running over. But I totally like I love to read. I love books, and this is like one of the best vegan books that I've read. So thank you
Mm,
for coming on and sharing your time with me again. And also had you interviewed me, not necessarily for the book, but we've talked on your
yeah,
show, and I
yeah.
appreciate that. So definitely follow all of the links in description here. We've got all the ways to connect with Dr. Angela. And if you don't listen to me, listen to a doctor. Okay, this is. But I appreciate it, and go check out the book. I know it's bought it on Amazon, so you can check it out there or in all the other places mentioned. And it is very like very cost effective, I would say. Like, I was expecting that it would be a lot higher, so I love that it's also very affordable for people who might be exploring veganism. So thank you for that
Awesome.
too.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I really enjoyed our conversation.
And is there anything in closing here that you want to say about the book, or about what it meant to you to put it out there? I know it had to be exciting when it was finally released.
Yeah, it was super exciting. I think it's, the whole process of creating the book maybe is a reminder of the process of creating anything. So it was me showing up day after day, doing the next right thing, the next step, whatever that was. And so maybe that could be true for whatever in our life we're trying to create or, contribute right now. Is it can be a long process sometimes for change to happen, whether it's our own journey of healing, whether we're trying to spread this message beyond ourselves, but just to keep staying grounded, include self-care, and then be connected to other vegans through groups like this, and then just keep showing up for the next step and the next step. And then for me, like 4 years later, like
4 years, guys. You hear that? Like,
yeah,
that is
4 years
a
from
lot
when
of
I
work.
started the research,
Oh,
I
support this
started,
lady.
yeah, 2021 is when I started the surveys and interviews. And then, it's been with the publisher for a year. They had to do their part. So it is a process sometimes, but whatever our calling is, to just keep showing up.
Yes, I was saying this to Angela earlier before we wrap up too. I know personally how difficult it is when I was writing the book, and I was only sharing my own journey and a blueprint. Like, she shared not only her journey, but also all the other people that she interviewed, and that's what I want you guys to see.
Yeah.
Marakita, good way to end it. She said, "Go run and get the book. Everyone, go click the link. Let's say, oh my goodness, when you went on Vegan Knowledge JJ, there was like 2 million books sold."
Wow, awesome. I'd love that. And there's one other great quote right there in your comments about
Oh, I
true
just saw
happiness.
that. Okay, let me pull that up here.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you,
And that that
Patricia.
fits that fits with the book perfectly too. So another beautiful comment. Thank you. That's
True
actually,
happiness comes from being kind to others and living consistently in alignment with your values and ethical beliefs. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I didn't say your name properly, but I appreciate that everyone can see it here. I'll leave that up as we.
yeah. Yeah, no,
Um,
that's a beautiful, that captures the essence really of much of what this book and the research was sharing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. I really appreciate you coming on. Everyone, go check out The Vegan Transformation, a journey to heal yourself and the world. Let me try that again. The Vegan Transformation, a journey to heal yourself and the world. Thank you for this beautiful piece of literature you put out in the world, and for coming on.
Well, thank you. And so glad to be here. And, just, I don't know, just keep on with your own health, and whatever steps beyond that to contribute beyond yourself as well.
Hi, Sandra. Thank you for coming on. She said, great conversation. The Vegan Transformation is truly an informative book. I love that. Thank you. I
Thanks,
appreciate you.
Sandra. She's my publicist. She's helping me with a lot of my outreach. So
Oh,
she's
wonderful.
a wonderful vegan hype woman. I love her.
Thank you for squeezing me in. I know you're probably in demand here for this awesome book, once people read it, especially. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing your amazing transformation with us and your book. We appreciate you.
Thank you, JJ, for
All
all you
right.
do.
Oh, it's my purpose, right? We just said it. So I love it. And I love interviewing, especially people like, about their journey and health and everything. And then this book, it's been really a pleasure to get to know you and and now your writing and your book. It's so amazing. I'll be continuing to share it.
Awesome. Thanks.